Everybody stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. Clerk, take the roll.
O'Connor.
Here.
Morissette.
Here.
Alms.
Here.
McCormick.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Hoggett.
Here.
Hall.
Here.
All right, we're just going to make a quick change to the agenda, and we're going to bring in the Hudson ambassadors that are up front here. Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Megan Simmons. This is Kylie Gustafson, Jordan Jankowski, and Alexa Tennant. They're my fellow ambassadors. We want to thank you guys so much for your continued support and your generous donation to our program. We're really trying our very best to represent Hudson in the best way possible, and we're eternally grateful. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else going to say anything?
No,
Okay.
it's just me.
Hang on one second.
All right.
He's not going to say something.
Just a little Hudson.
Oh, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll go to citizen comments. Does anyone have any comments? Any comments? Yes, sir. Step forward, please. Identify yourself and address.
Hi. My name is Jim Kaler, and I'd like to comment on the inclusion resolution. I want to thank you, people of the council, who give you your time and talents to oversee the business of the community. And I'd like to say this, I see the inclusion resolution as a public health and safety issue. What is my motivation for speaking on the issue is that my motivation is that I'm concerned for the physical health, the mental health, and the spiritual health of our upcoming younger generation. As I read this resolution, I don't think of it, it has anything to do with the lack of neighborliness in Hudson. I think Hudson is welcoming to all. What I think is that this resolution has an agenda to change the morals of the community's young people. Those who are in their teens and young adult years, who are trying to sort out the increasingly confusing messages in our society about sexuality, what can be fulfillment or what can bring disaster. Today's popular culture dresses up alternative lifestyles to look very attractive and daring. However, what too few know is that many in that lifestyle suffer miserably as a result. Some studies have shown that homosexuals are about 50% more likely to suffer from depression and engage in substance abuse than the rest of the culture, than the rest of the population. The risk of suicide jumps over 200% if an individual is active in a homosexual lifestyle. Also, the lifespan of homosexuals on an average is 24 years shorter than a heterosexual. There are many other statistics, but I think those suffice. Society is legitimately concerned about health risk. We impose our taxes on, they impact our taxes and everyone's chances of illness and injury. Because we care about smokers, society tries to discourage them from smoking by higher insurance premiums, taxes on cigarettes, and bans against smoking in public. These societal pressures cause many to quit. They likewise encourage non-smokers to stay non-smokers. Studies show that homosexuals are engaging in dangerous activities because we care about them, and those tempted to join them It is important that we neither encourage nor legitimize such a destructive lifestyle. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's up to you, if you'd like to, I can take it. Pardon, what's that?
No.
No, it's good. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Any other comments?
I have a different topic. Can we go on to another subject?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm here to propose to the council about
Oh, I'm sorry, would, your name and address, please?
Robert Cizik. I'm from North Hudson. And what I've got here is a proposal to teach the Constitution during Constitution Week. And should I hand out a thing for every member here, or just say it first?
You can just say it first, I guess. And
Well, thank you, Mayor and the City Council members. Thanks for allowing me to speak. This is going to be short, and I'll be brief. But on September 1st of 1787, 39 of our 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention signed the U.S. Constitution. And in order to commemorate that occasion, the U.S. Congress passed a law in 1952 setting aside the week of September 17th as Constitution Week. This law urged civil and educational authorities of states, counties, cities, towns to make plans for the proper observance of the day and for, I quote, for the complete instruction of citizens in their responsibilities and opportunities as citizens of the United States and of the state and locality in which they reside, unquote. That was part of the law that Congress passed. The citizens of St. Croix Valley, a group I belong to, have drafted a resolution for the City Council to take a look at to help this celebration and comply with this 1952 law. By allowing members of this group to teach about our founding documents and the duty of a citizen during this Constitution Week. This instruction will be hosted in the City Hall and open to the public with the sole intent of informing all interested citizens about our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and the duty of a U.S. citizen to uphold these documents. So what I have here is the actual proposal. Would you like me to read that, or should I just hand it out? Read it?
read it, please.
All right. A proposed resolution to the City Council of Hudson, Wisconsin to endorse and implement the week of September 17th as U.S. Constitution Week. Whereas the City of Hudson will endorse, support, and implement an educational opportunity for all residents to learn about the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the duties of a citizen. Classes will be offered at the City Hall for 1 week and conducted by volunteers of Citizens for St. Croix Valley. Whereas the City of Hudson will hold its first day of this Constitution Week class September 17th of 2018, which is a Monday. Whereas the City of Hudson strives to encourage a clear understanding of the U.S. Constitution and its importance to each resident of Hudson. Therefore, be it resolved, this resolution shall take effect immediately upon adoption, allowing preparatory time for volunteers to make arrangements to have a room available the week of September 17th at City Hall, Hudson, Wisconsin. Be it further resolved, we affirm Hudson's commitment to this educational opportunity as a fundamental aspect of our community residents. A fundamental aspect of our community. Residents will be informed of this opportunity by announcements in the local paper, businesses, social media, and schools. Be it further resolved, the City of Hudson will include the week of September 17th as U.S. Constitution Week in any future strategic plans, and shall encourage all the other units of government to join the city in promoting knowledge of the U.S. Constitution to residents of Hudson. Be it finally resolved, the City of Hudson, Wisconsin declares the week of September 17th of every year U.S. Constitution Week, and will offer classes on the Declaration and the U.S. Constitution and the duty of a citizen at City Hall during Constitution Week. And then they're just assigned by the mayor, the city attorney, city clerk.
Okay.
That's it. Questions, anybody?
We can't exchange in a dialogue we cannot exchange it in a dialogue during citizen comments because what you just talked about is not actually on the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, so we appreciate you bringing this forward. If you would like, you could leave copies up here and we'll get that submitted to everybody.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And thank you for being here. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Any other comments?
Sure, I can distribute them to them.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll take care of it.
Take it to the
My name is Darla Myers. My address is 1098 Golden Oaks Lane in Hudson. I have handed out a proposed resolution that I've also sent by email with just a few extra comments. If I were to say, maybe it is good to have the haters outed so we can know them by their limp, what would you think? Would you think I might be threatening violence against someone? If I were to take a picture of your vehicle and license plate and post it on my Facebook page inviting hate, potential harassment, and intimidation, what would you think? The above represents what some of the so-called inclusion group have said or done. And there is so much more hatred, racism, and exclusion in the open records documents that the council should seriously consider the negative impact of aligning yourselves with this proposed inclusion resolution. I now present this resolution for partnership in promoting respect for human life from fertilization, conception to natural death for your approval. Whereas the City of Hudson is committed to respect all human life as a fundamental aspect of our community. And whereas cities and towns are the best places to make respect for all human life an everyday priority. And whereas locally elected officials can and should lead the way forward in making respect for all human life a priority in America's cities and towns. And whereas the City of Hudson has designed this partnership for working toward respect for all human life to support cities and towns in their commitment to respect all human life. And whereas the City of Hudson and its members believe in communities that promote this respect for all human life. And whereas the City of Hudson and its members believe a community that respects all human life promotes citizen participation and engagement. And whereas the City of Hudson joins other communities that respect all human life without exception. And whereas the City of Hudson hereby declares that all Hudson organizations and citizens shall protect and cherish every human being from fertilization, conception to natural death. And all Hudson organizations and citizens will not promote, fund, nor cause the artificial termination of any person, regardless of their stage of development. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Hudson hereby reaffirms our commitment to unconditional respect for all human life as a fundamental aspect of our community, pledges active efforts to seek to achieve that goal, and urges all citizens of the City of Hudson to join together to support this inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without compromise, without excuse, and without exception. Be it further resolved that the City of Hudson joins all other communities that partner to protect all human life from fertilization, conception to natural death, without compromise, without excuse, and without exception. If you approve the inclusion resolution, you must, by setting that precedent, accept and approve this resolution for partnership in promoting respect for human life from fertilization, conception to natural death. This resolution is truly inclusive, without exception, without compromise, and without excuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Further comments?
Good evening. Paul Burning, 1806 Trillium Way in the city of Hudson. I'm glad to see that actually one thing I was going to speak on is being resolved here tonight, so I'm not going to speak in regards to the committee that's been going around for the last 4 months, unsanctioned by the council. But what I do want to speak to tonight in regards to EMS, I'm not going to speak a whole lot to it because I think it's quite apparent that it's going in a direction that is far different from what it was a year ago or even what it was 6 months ago. The model is changing. But one big change that is coming, other than moving to option 3 to option 1 eventually, is this 50-50 funding formula that our partners are looking to have the city council vote on. The last EMS commission meeting, it was made abundantly clear that our partners don't have the money or the levy capability of funding EMS on a per capita basis. And so now you, as the city council, are faced with an opportunity here to either become Priceline.com and let our partners name their own price, or you can make sure that equal access to an emergency medical service is spread out evenly throughout all of our partnerships. There is a vast difference from what I'm hearing in these commission meetings from equity or equity of outcome to equality of access or equal access. And I think those are the big things that you as a council, I would implore you to keep in mind that this isn't a taxi service. This is not a limousine service that one is using more than the other. It is an emergency medical service that is on standby for every citizen and every business inside of our partnership. And so when it comes to the per capita argument and arrangement, whatever you want to call it, that arrangement is set so that every person inside of the servicing area will have equal access to it at a moment's notice. So that's what I've got in regards to that. And as far as being able to make it to a public safety meeting, I want to bring that up here and maybe have you refer it over to Randy because I just haven't been able to make it to your meetings. I understand that there's a Carmichael corridor study going on. It sounds like it's extending to the east of Carmichael on Hanley. I would ask that if we're going to do that, could we have it go west and study the traffic conditions on Hanley going west from Carmichael to O'Keefe? It's because there's safety issues that some of my neighbors have in regards to walking, especially crossing over there by the Aldi intersection at Foxglove and Hanley. So that's what I've got for you this evening. Thank you for your guys' service. And one last thing, we should be extremely grateful, all of us. Tonight there are dozens of people that no longer get to partake in this democracy that we have, peaceful assembly to sit here and talk about the things that we differ on, come to resolution on, different points of view. But my stomach, and I believe all of yours, was turning maybe early this morning when you guys got the news or late last night. So, yeah. Anyway, thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any comments?
Hi, I'm Marion Weber at 604 Grandview Drive, and I know there are a lot of projects coming up with roads, and I have a concern about how little talk there is about people on the roads. And that's what we're all about. We're all people. We're people who we get in our cars to go far distances. We get in our cars to go distances that if we had better opportunity, we would ride our bikes and walk to. And many times, and actually pretty much every time that we talk about a road project, there are a lot of things that can, many things that can be done to make the road safer for pedestrians and bicyclists that don't cost a bunch of money. They don't require construction. They just require a thoughtful look at how can we design this road with paint to make it safer for our people. Because if a person hits a car, there's not much that's going to happen to the car. If a car hits a person or a bicyclist, there's a lot of nasty stuff that's going to happen. And I think that our people are the most important part of who we are in Hudson, and how we care for our people, how we welcome people into our community, providing safe ways to get across the street or down the street. When you talk about Hanley, do you know that's a bike route, an official bike route? It's one of the ways that bicyclists get around. And you had a request from neighbors to make it safer for them to cross a specific part of Hanley. Why can't we? It's not that hard. It has to do with marking the street. And if you get resistance from the DOT about certain things and you ask them the right question, you'll find out you can do it, because they want to work with you in the long run. And I just would like to have people pay a whole bunch more attention to everyone who uses those roads, not just a few people, and not just the cars.
Thank you. Any other comments?
My name is Diane Yoakum, and I live in New Richmond, Wisconsin. I have a business in Hudson. I've had this for 26 years. So, Honorable Mayor and councilmen and women, I thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. I don't have a resolution, so I come before you tonight to draw attention to the state of our nation. As was spoken earlier about the tragedy that happened this morning, our nation is divisive. It is a literal bloodbath of evil and hate. Yet we live in a nation that is more inclusive, more welcoming, and more protective of human rights than any other nation in the whole world. I draw attention to our state, which is also inclusive, non-discriminatory, and welcomes all who want to better that state. I draw attention to our community, including Hudson and the surrounding area, a community that has grown faster than most in the last 20 years. Hudson has been accommodating, welcoming, helpful to all those individuals and businesses that wish to, again, contribute and make it better and safer, a safer place to live. When businesses come to this community, as mine did 26 years ago, they were vetted and tested to assure that what they bring to the community will bring value to the quality of life. Is that fair? Or is it discriminating? It is strange to hear people accusing you and other people who are attending here of not being diverse enough. By whose standard are we not diverse? Is diversity based on color? It seems like, as one particular person had said some time ago, look around the room. This council in this room is not diverse enough. By my view, there is a lot of diversity. There's diversity of opinions, lifestyle, faith, family, body structure, you name it. I view and value people not by their color or any other minority label that one might put on a document or use, but by their contribution to my community, their contribution to my country, my county, my state, and the nation, to make a better place to live. Matthew 7:15 says, by their works we shall know them. That's what makes a difference. Yet in this day I find I am judged and excluded from conversations because I'm Caucasian, or because I'm a Christian, or because I'm a woman, or because I'm a strong business person. That does not bother me, as my one and only judge is Jesus Christ. There will always be conflict. Christ said that the poor will always be with us. The world is not fair, but who said it was supposed to be fair? Life sometimes deals us bad events. How we deal with those events determines and builds our character, not the law or a resolution. As a government entity, you have a very difficult job, and I applaud you for it. One of which, however, it is not to make the world fair, not to attempt to regulate morality. There are laws in place that attempt to bring fairness to the workplace, to promote peace and equality in our country. There are laws to put in place to prevent discrimination and harmful acts. But lessons from the past prove that this is man's feeble attempt to bring fairness to our country. Yet we have violence. We have difference of opinion. We fail to accept opinions of others without ridicule or threats. I do not need to tell you how to do your job or what your job is, but I know that you have spent unlimited hours with phone calls, meetings, and so forth on just this subject. If this resolution is passed, the council opens up a floodgate of more resolutions. Is this really what you're elected to do? I think not. I encourage the council to reject what is called the inclusion resolution, as it is in fact redundant and opens doors for over-regulation and actually is an exclusion resolution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments? Any other comments? Close this portion of the agenda. Move to the consent agenda.
To approve the minutes from the special meeting and regular meeting of September 18th, 2017. To approve claims in the amount of $539,224.50. Contingent on payment of any outstanding debt owed to the city and successful completion of the background check. To approve the issuance of 5 irregular operator licenses that are on file in the clerk's office for the period of October 3rd, 2017 to June 30th, 2019. To approve no parking signs on the north side of Vine Street from the high school entrance to approximately 100 feet west of the... Pull that. To approve the Willow River Super Fun Run Walk on October 7th, 2017 at 9:30 a.m., beginning and ending at Willow River Elementary. To approve the Willow Walks on May 22nd, 2018 at 9 a.m., beginning and ending at Willow River Elementary School, contingent upon the coordinator filing a separate application. To approve the easement agreement to construct a fence within a drainage and utility easement with Jesse and Jillian Tuvnes. To approve the purchase of 8 portable radios from Professional Wireless at a cost of $7,240. To accept the donation of a battery-operated extrication tool from the Fire Company Number 1. And to purchase the document imaging software system, therefore, using money from the allocated in capital funds.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah, motion and second to approve everything but item D.
And G.
And G.
He was
And
pulled
G.
because that was supposed to.
Letter of engagement.
Oh, okay. Roll call?
Morissette?
Yes.
Alms?
Yes.
McCormick?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Hoggett?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Consent agenda is approved.
D was pulled.
Right, you want to take that up now, or Jim, do you want to take that up now?
Yeah, I think that'd be
Okay.
appropriate. I guess in looking at that, I missed the public safety meeting, so it wasn't part of the discussion, but only 100 feet, limiting it to 100 feet from the exit in my driving by, says that's not enough, because there's parking 100 feet down from that, and it still seems to be impacting the flow of traffic. So I'm wondering why we have any parking there when we didn't before. So I guess that's a change. We're now allowing parking where we didn't before, even though, and we've added a third entrance lane. So I'm kind of curious, okay, this is actually, looks to me like it's a reversion. We're allowing parking where we didn't allow it before.
No,
But,
that's, Marty, I think we can address why we're doing it and the,
Well, the school district had asked us to put that no parking in place out in front of Vine Street. For the simple fact is that there's gonna be a right turn lane going into that west entrance. They wanna make sure people aren't parking in that once that gets marked and signed. And the other portion is that they didn't want, especially students parking farther down west of that entrance because of the way the road is supposed to be configured with that's going to be like a passing area, so they didn't want to have any accidents there. The other problem they were looking at is if they had a big event going at the school, if that would hurt the sight lines of kids trying to come in or come out at that time. So that's the reason they requested that no parking in that area.
Yeah, and I agree with it, but I don't think it goes far enough. I think it needs to be further than 100 feet down from the entrance to the school parking lot. That's their
So
parking there
your
now.
suggestion is to go how much farther though? Jim?
Well, one of the suggestions was up to the curve, and that apparently was changed, so. Good.
I don't recall anything.
I've never, I go down Vine Street 2 or 3 times a day, it seems. I've never seen, I do not recall ever seeing any parking from the high school down to 11th Street.
Who requested? We haven't seen any requests come to public safety for anything more than 100 feet.
Is there parking there now?
So where it begins to curve towards
I'd have to
12th
take a look at the meeting minutes, but I don't
Well, the request that's here is to about where Vine begins to curve towards 12th Street. And that's certainly more than 100 feet down.
Yeah, there didn't used to be parking on Vine Street.
Yeah, we've never
At all.
had parking
Well,
there.
but again, that portion of Vine Street is open to parking.
So
Currently,
people-
right now,
people
even-
just didn't park
It is
there?
right now.
Is
Yeah,
that what
people
you're
just
saying?
haven't parked on that side of the street. They could park right in the curve there. There's no restrictions
I
on
agree.
it.
My point is that we've not had parking on Vine Street, and now we're going to, all of a sudden, we're going to allow some parking on Vine Street. We're just restricting, we're allowing it further up than we used to. That's my observation.
What he's saying is that you could park there, just nobody did,
Right.
Correct.
oddly enough.
So, I don't have a problem with it going farther. I think that was a suggestion coming out of public safety is that we'll just go 100 feet from that entrance, but
We approved the request that was presented. We didn't see anything over 200. Did you remember that?
No, I don't remember.
Where Vine begins to curve, and it's certainly much further down. That's down to the end of the property, past the end of the property, school property. So I don't know.
I guess I don't have any issues with it. If you want to extend it further to 200 feet, does that do anything for?
no, I think that'll limit because then it's on the curve of the road and I don't know if we'll have any parking down there at all. But yeah, I don't think the school would object to that.
Is that a motion?
That'd be, yes, my motion.
Second.
Got a motion, a second. Discussion?
Can you articulate that again? Just so
We would
know
extend
what-
it to past the curve. So once the road straightens out again, that parking would then be allowed on, and that's only a few, not too much further till 12th Street, and from 12th to 11th, as I recall, there is no parking allowed.
Correct.
Where the hill is,
Yeah. That's only during the winter months.
I have,
Right.
through the parking.
Yeah, no, I think that's only during the winter months. Now, Jim, is yours to go around the curve to 12th Street then?
Well-
Or do you just want to go to where it begins to curve to go down the hill?
to
What
where
up
it
to that
makes,
driveway?
where it's no longer a safety issue. Parking on that curve, I think, is a safety issue. You need to get around that.
Okay.
But you're probably a better judge of that than I am.
Well, and again, I don't know if that would end up forcing the kids farther down the road, but we're also going to start impacting, once you get to that curve, you're going to impact that neighbor that lives right there in the corner of 12th, where his driveway's at. And he does have people from time to time that come and visit that do park there from time to time. Not very often,
Okay.
but if we put no parking all the way to 12th Street, that will have an impact.
Yeah,
on him.
I'm not advocating that.
Right.
I realize there are residents right there that do use that.
So,
So wherever it's appropriate then is what you're saying?
We need to be looking at it. I don't, I didn't measure it, but I'm certain that 100 feet, which is five car lengths, say, is not sufficient, and that we need to be moving it, because they're parking past that already. And I look at that and I say, wow, that looks to me like that interferes with the flow of traffic and the lanes that are being planned there.
well, I wonder if we could just say the end of the school's property line to the west of that entrance, because I think that's where the construction ended. That's about where the road begins to curve.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Not impacting the property owner,
Right, exactly.
right.
So the motion is,
to the end of the school property.
well, is that what you said?
Yeah, to the end of the school property. I amend
I
my
agree.
motion to say
Good with that?
that.
Yep.
Okay. All right, we got a motion, a second discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Presentation regarding waterfront vision study by SEH.
Some of your juice.
Evening.
Evening.
I'm Ed.
Welcome.
Yeah, I've got a.
We're delighted to have you here, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm Ed Freer. I'm a senior urban designer, waterfront planner for SEH. Alex Thill is with me. He's one of our associates. And we were hired end of the summer to assess your waterfront. And just because we're here to talk about your waterfront doesn't mean it's terrific. It is terrific. But as we walk, and one of our goals here is to help develop a vision for the waterfront. And why do we do that? So we were visually, and we walked the site. We did some analysis based on our experience. We talked to a number of stakeholders the whole day. We've done some research. And so the process of this effort is tonight we're going to share some of the things we found, and we're generating some alternatives. The idea is to share some alternatives. This is for informational purposes. These are not recommendations. Get feedback. We've gotten feedback. We've been here since 8 o'clock this morning talking to people again and discussing things that we knew, things that we didn't know, and just explaining what the opportunities are. So after today and tonight and the next couple of weeks, as we get feedback, we'll then come up with a consensus plan or a vision plan. With that, we'll assess a broad, and at 3,000 feet, we'll try and split things up and get a sense of what this might cost for budgetary purposes, not for construction. And then we'll also put together a matrix of how do we prioritize this, how do we pay for it, so that we'll look for some public-private partnership opportunities and be strategic about moving forward. So again, you have a terrific waterfront. I've been here over the last 30 years. I'll be very honest and candid. It's tired. There's some wonderful new things. There's some tired things that need to be thought about. Some unification of certain design elements. There's some water level issues. It's so popular. You have some boating issues. Minimizing conflict between active recreation and pedestrians and the vehicles, the parking, all that good stuff that we all like to talk about. But on the heels of some serious things that were just talked about, this really is about the people of this community, the quality of this river, and the quality of life. And so hopefully we can engage in a conversation over the next couple of months and come up with a vision where we can have an even better waterfront. With that, I'm going to have Alex walk you through this. Again, understand that the feedback and the pieces that you like or dislike from the different alternatives or the discussions or enlightening us on what we don't know will hopefully come up with a vision plan that will have some solid, doable, implementable recommendations. And again, I work on a lot of waterfronts around the country, and don't be overwhelmed by the ideas. Don't be overwhelmed by how the heck are we going to do all this. This stuff happens over decades. It's incremental. It's incremental from an effort standpoint. It's incremental from a leadership. It's incremental from a funding standpoint. So again, don't be overwhelmed, and let's kind of do what's right for the community and the river. With that, Alex?
Good evening. As Ed said, my name's Alex, and I'm going to do my best to walk you through the alternatives that we've come up with and some of the reasoning behind some of it. But first, I'd like to get everyone orientated to the study area of where we're looking. The project area that we're studying here is from the King's private boat launch to the south of the marina, all the way up to where St. Croix Street comes into the riverfront. Within that area, there's a bunch of different elements that we've highlighted that are going to show up in different aspects throughout these alternatives, such as the public beach, the amphitheater, the dike road going out to the other swim beach, and so on. Upon our visit, as Ed said, we spent many hours walking the shoreline, meeting people that were down in the park, utilizing a bunch of different aspects of the parks. We also held stakeholder meetings. But these pictures just start to highlight some of the existing conditions that are out there today. Shoreline conditions, water levels, fluctuating water levels, different uses. You can see in the lower pictures there's a guy fishing, there's an offloading sailboat, and then there's the opportunity to actually recreate in the water with swimming beach and paddle crafting. Some other elements that are within the downtown and riverfront corridor, it's really important to also understand the connection to downtown. There's fabulous restaurants in Hudson. There's fabulous, as Ed mentioned, tired infrastructure, old buildings, old manufacturing buildings. So how can we harness that to enhance the waterfront, enhance downtown Hudson? So that's kind of what we started to look at. And we used 5 different analysis tools. So we started by looking at pedestrian recreational access. So this is more of the pedestrian routes, intersection nodes, destinations. Then we started to we wanted to identify how vehicles actually work in this area as well. So you have your main route down 2nd Street, but then you have your local traffic that travels down 1st and up into the upland and downtown. It was important to highlight land use to kind of identify the different districts between the riverfront and downtown and some of the civic buildings throughout this area. Water-based was also another important analysis that we needed to look at. We needed to identify, so more in the northern lagoon, you have a lot more active recreation, motorboating, skiing, water skiing, whereas the no-wake zone is on the southern side of the dike, which provides much better access to paddle crafting and slow-moving boat moving activities. The final framework that we looked at was an ecological framework. So this both looks at the shoreline conditions present today, but it also identifies the northern lagoon as more of the bird watching area, the trumpeter swan wintering habitat. There's an osprey nest that we were told about. So that becomes more of the native ecological sector, whereas more of the recreation becomes on the southern lagoon, on the southern side of the dike. So as I alluded to before, we held stakeholder meetings on June 26th. We had a bunch of different groups come in. They expressed concerns, opinions. There was the businesses, regulators, and promoters. Thank you, Ed. From that meeting, we got a list of 6 different topics: park and site programming, circulation, redevelopment, water use, economics, and ecology. Each of these topics we kind of distilled down into as you can see, there's quite a bit that was discussed. Much of these were repeats from a bunch of different groups as well. So we took these, and these started to formulate our overall document that we presented the following day after the stakeholders meeting. So this graphic here highlights a lot of the objectives that we heard, a lot of the opportunity zones. It starts to formulate thoughts that were brought up for what could happen in the waterfront, what could happen within the downtown. These sketches were also process sketches, trying to work things out with stakeholders as we move forward with certain ideas that people were coming up with and we wanted to highlight graphically. Before I get into the actual alternatives that we distilled further from all that information, we use these guiding principles from the Cooperative Management River Plan. So the river town, what is a river town? Making sure there's a mixture of commercial, park, and residential developments. And we wanted to stay true to the vision of the Lower St. Croix, the vision plan, making sure that it maintains its wild and scenic value, unpolluted waters. So we use these as guiding principles for actually formulating formulating these 2 alternatives that I'm going to present. The alternatives we split up into 2 different categories for description purposes. One will be organic, one will be urban, and they highlight these different areas. So I would say all of them talk about having transient docks, improving the amphitheater, access, ability or access back into the downtown, access from one end to the other, both for recreational and passive uses.
So can you go just a little bit slower? This is all, I haven't seen this before.
All right, I'm sorry.
Can you just back up so we can read it? Are we going to ask you questions now or later?
We can ask them whenever you decide.
Okay, you said remove seawall for natural shoreline. Where are you planning to do that?
We'll show you in a minute. But that would be out right outside on the south side of the pedestrian bridge across to the dike.
That's in one alternative, and the other alternative, the seawall's not really.
Yeah. So we show a lot in these alternatives that in one something may stay, but in another it might drastically change. That way we get two different perspectives.
Alex,
yes.
can I just, there will be a copy of all of this for everybody.
Would have been good to have it before, but that's all right.
Okay. Do you want me to stay on this a little longer?
No, I'm done. Thanks.
So the two alternatives here, which we'll blow up in a minute, I wanted to just emphasize that these are in the alternative phase of the process, and they're not final, and they can be mixed and matched. So as I was saying before, elements can be picked from one or from the other. We try to highlight a lot of these bold moves, but then we also try to scale back on some of the other ones to make sure that we get a perspective of both sides. The first alternative I'm going to look at or present to you is organic. So it looks at relocating the sailing school and the community sailing program. It looks at expanding the boat launch parking for additional boats, a relocated amphitheater to increase seat size and sun ray views, which I'll explain in a little bit. Creating these outdoor passive recreation activities such as a nature playground, floating boardwalk for birding, for fishing, but it also includes transient dockage to allow for boats to come into downtown, to shop, to recreate, to populate downtown Hudson. So Area A in the organic plan is at the King Launch on the southern side. So this area, we're envisioning relocating the sailing school and the paddle sports. It allows them to expand, have a larger area for their growing need for activities, but it also takes it allows us to formulate a trailhead there. So people can come there, offload their bike. It becomes more of a destination for recreational biking, longboarding, rollerblading, all that stuff on the trails. So they can come into downtown as well. Area B is moving up a little bit further by the boat launch. You can see in this image that the expanded boat parking would increase trailers about 10 to 12 or 12 to 15 additional boat trailers. It's important to highlight that we're looking at increasing or creating the ability for the trail connection to travel around the parking or the park, the playground. When we were here on our first site visit, we saw a jogger weaving in and out of the trailers of the boats because there's no access across that route. But the bold move in this scheme is looking at the Buckeye Garage and how could that become a destination on the waterfront? Could that potentially become a beer garden or a restaurant or a concession stand or a rentable space for family gatherings with improved bathrooms and shelter? So that's kind of what this scheme kind of emphasizes. With the addition of the parking lot, we're able to create green infrastructure. So you could have a wetland with a boardwalk system for native plants and to help manage some of the stormwater before it actually enters the St. Croix River. Some images of what that might look like. These images are from all over the world. Some of them we've worked on. Some of them are just really good examples of what we're trying to convey for Hudson. But this is what the Buckeye Garden or Buckeye Beer Garden could look like. You could have string lights at night. You could have picnic tables for people to gather, have a beer, have a sandwich, and basically enjoy being down by the water. Some stormwater treatments, different boardwalks, native plants, like I said, but this helps prevent water from running directly into the St. Croix River. Area C, so this is where we had the modified shoreline, the naturalized shoreline that I mentioned before. What we'd be doing, or what this really is showcasing, is de-armorizing the wall in the sense that it's a straight drop. It would be more of a stagger, either riprap or terraced stone that helps with wave deflection, energy disbursement back into the water. It also creates more habitat opportunity for water organisms such as fish and native vegetation.
We're not de-armorizing, we're just modifying a bulkhead condition to a slope condition. It's a shoreline modification.
An example of what that could potentially look like is something like this, where people still have access to the water for fishing and to touch the water, but it fluctuates with the water levels, but it also creates this opportunity that's not a straight drop directly into the water. In Area D, I'm looking at, so this would be the amphitheater area. I'm looking at possibly doing an overlook terrace off of the pedestrian bridge, reorientating the amphitheater to the location up at the northern end of the bowl, or the upper part of the bowl that you can see, the lawn. By relocating the amphitheater, we're getting a lot more space for people to enjoy concerts, but we're also reorientating so that sun no longer will affect anyone's eyes. That was a few comments that we heard that in late evenings you can get sun rays at the current location, and it can impede your view and the enjoyment of watching a concert or performance. So this rearranges some of the outdoor spaces. We'd have a new amphitheater along with some terrace seating, a new shoreline boardwalk up to the beach area, relocate or renovate and reorientate some of the concessions, or in the beach, the boat house would stay the same, but the area around it to create more of a usable space than it is currently, and create a nature playground for children to play in more of a hands-on nature kind of way. Another important thing is to point out that there could be a potential kayak launch relocation and nature center built right next to the one building that's there now. The name escapes me. So some looks of what that terraced overlook might look like. You could have access directly into the water. People could sit out, have lunch. They could have little small gatherings. You could do small performances that don't necessarily need an amphitheater. A renovated amphitheater, something like this, having a large lawn. You could do movie nights in the park. The lawn could be used for recreational sports. But the amphitheater could be something that, like I said, shields you from the sun, but also has this pass-through look, so you can actually still continue to see the water. A section of that might look like what's below. Some of the terrace seating could potentially look like this. Scaling it back, it expands the actual seating area of this amphitheater area, but it also creates this nice little picnic area facing the riverfront. Nature playground along these lines, kids running through logs, jumping off sticks, it's all nature. It's a very educational experience for children as well, to be involved with the natural environment and not necessarily have to be on a swing. Just an option. This is an example of what a nature center could potentially look like down by the nature playground. It could be down by a kayak launch. It could be kind of incorporated all within this area as more of a place for people to come learn about the St. Croix River, come learn about Hudson, and have access to the beauty that is there. Floating boardwalk. Doesn't have to be as extreme as the one on the right, but that's there to show that you could have this undulating path through, the weeds, where that's a great area for catching bluegill and, panfish. But these boardwalks get people out into the water. It gets people seeing birds. It gets people seeing the trumpeter swans, for example, as they're wintering. And these systems could be floating so that they rise and lower with the river levels. Winter activities are very important to pay attention to as well. You could have an outdoor flea market. We got to think that the spaces don't just go away when the winter comes. There's opportunities to create program in all types or all seasons. The final area we're going to look at for this alternative is the dike and the dike road. We want to kind of create a destination at the end. So whether that's an old toll bridge ruin park that pays homage to the foundations that are there now, opens up a little bit, creates fishing access, having a destination building of sorts, potentially concession stands, maybe restrooms, a pergola with a deck that kind of overlooks the beach area, or simply just by dressing up the roadway with seat planters that allow us to get more vegetation out on the road. So that way you're continuously having this growth of new vegetation. The important part on this scheme is that the transient dock would be located here. This dock is approximately 800 to 900 feet long. It would work as a new location or a renovated location for an excursion boat, but it creates this opportunity for people to dock their boat, get on the levee, get on the dike, and then walk right into downtown. An example of what that destination building might look like is something like this. You could have, like I said, the concession stand with some picnic tables, a pergola, shade structure overlooking the water. At the end of the dike, you could have, in the old Toll Ridge Ruin Park, an overlook like this. This is one that we actually just finished in Chippewa Falls, on the Chippewa River. So something like this that would encapsulate the historic monuments and the foundations that are there, but yet create more of an inviting atmosphere for everyone to enjoy. Transient dock, something similar to this, whether it's storing boats or people having little social gatherings. It would all be part of that program. It wouldn't just be for boats, it would be for everyone that was walking and recreating. And some seat planners, quick sketches like this, something that differentiates the pavement, creating these little planters like I mentioned so you can get small ornamental trees, you could do shrubs, something that gets more green out there because currently the soil really isn't conducive for a lot of vegetation. I know there's trees growing now, but it becomes harder and harder to replace those as they fail. So this would be an option to get more greenery onto the levee road. The second alternative, urban. So I'm going to kind of walk it through the same way, and it has a lot of the same elements, but they might look a little bit different. So Area A, instead of having relocated sailing club and sailing school, or rowing club and sailing school, it would just be a renovated boat launch. Something that has a little bit more organization to it to maximize its efficiency. Area B, we wouldn't look at expanding the boat parking, but we'd have more access inside the park. So you'd have a more direct route to the riverfront promenade, which would be a little bit wider setback, and we'd have the transient docks put up against the seawall that is there now today. Modified seawall. What this does is it allows access directly into downtown. It allows people to come up and access the park directly instead of having to go on the levee road or the dike road. But it also creates this opportunity for programmatic elements such as swings or hammock areas or alleys of trees that get people involved and focusing on the waterfront.
The significance of the Walnut Street.
In this scheme, we're looking at having a improved Walnut Street from 2nd to 1st to ultimately the Dike Road. What we're envisioning here is it could be something along the lines that if you're going to have a farmer's market, the road could shut down. It could become more of a social gathering, a programmatic area for people to gather in downtown and then spill out into the park or onto the dike. So the idea is that it funnels people from 2nd Street through the downtown out into the park. We also have a modified terrace seat area with an overlook, which was similar to what we had shown on the previous alternative. This just has a little bit more of an orthogonal look, so more straight lines rather than the rounded look. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is as part of this, the sailing school would be relocated to the Buckeye building. What this does is it gets kids across the street so they no longer have to cross the street as they're hauling sailboats out to the water and have a new sailing beach directly across from the playground. Some images of riverfront promenades throughout the, from all different places. There's many different textures, there's many sizes, a lot of program elements, there's different benches. I mentioned before you could have hammocks or swings, something like this, where not all shade structure has to be from a tree. It could be literally from having an arbor above you. And then the image on the right, I've always liked it because it feels very much like a resort style. And on a beautiful waterfront, citizens that live here every day should have the luxury of feeling like they live in a resort. I mentioned before about the street connections and improved Walnut Street. So this is just a quick section of what that could potentially look like. For 6 days of the week, you could have normal traffic on it, but then you have designated areas for tents, pop-up shelters, art fairs, flea markets, stuff like that. It could be something like on the left where you have a very vibrant downtown, and ultimately this will spill out into the park and the riverfront. Area C looks at the area of the amphitheater. In this scheme, we're looking at renovating the amphitheater in a way that we would prevent the sun rays that I had mentioned before. And I'll explain that in the next slide. incorporating more stormwater management facilities off the parking lot near the boathouse or the beach house, and reorientating some pedestrian routes to better work with direct access. As I mentioned before, the lights for the renovated the amphitheater plus sun screening. This is an example of how we can make slight modifications to the existing amphitheater to alleviate some of the concerns. One option is you could put up a sunscreen that is literally built onto the current amphitheater that has more of a screen. You could do advertising on the screens. You could show what concerts are coming up, what to expect next, or you could simply do tree plantings. So in the lower left, you can see that you could do a semicircle of larger spade trees that would help provide much needed sun blockage from the sun rays in the evening. But it would also help fill the gap, as you can see in the elevation here, of that view shed that I said. But yet, with the trees being spaded, they're big enough that you still have view sheds underneath, so you can still see the river. They wouldn't block any views of the water. Some images here of what potential stormwater management could look like. There's a really native areas that really enhance educational purposes too. So these could be tied back to school programs or something along those lines in terms of an educational standpoint. Winter activities again, broom ball, could be dog sled races, or it could be showing people what dog sledding is all about. I know we don't have the winters that we used to. But we got to think about it in all 12 months of the year. We can't just assume that we're going to have just 9 months of activity and program. Area D here kind of shows the northern part, as I said, as the previous alternative did. Maintaining the kayak launch that's existing, but adding a floating pier a little further down the path that allows people to get out and fish, see birds, have access to the water. But we also incorporate a floating dock, a much smaller floating dock, which would be mainly for the rowing shells to launch in the morning. This scheme, as I mentioned in the first scheme, doesn't have, or the rowing facility would stay at their current location, which is here at the terminus of St. Croix Street. But they would need a much larger building. They expressed to us that they're expanding and need more storage, and really would hope to get larger shells to get more people involved in the program. Some of images of what those might look like. Kayak launches similar to how they are today. Sand beach, very accessible for the everyday goer, but you could have something like the one on the right that allows for more ADA accessibility for people that need a little bit more assistance getting in and out of the kayak. Rowing club facilities, the one on the left is a very large extreme of what would be needed for a rowing facility, and the one on the right is actually, you said a non-profit?
It's a community rowing program.
A community
one of the most popular in the country. It's on the Charles.
A community rowing program that houses the shells, has access for the members, but keeps all their equipment safely stored for whenever they need to access it. And the final area that we're going to look at today is Area E, looking at an additional or a different scheme for a ruined park and fishing access, getting restrooms and a beach deck out to the end. This one would be more focused on restrooms, not necessarily concessions or destination restaurant. Or something like that. Incorporated a dinghy dock. This was something we heard from some the sailing group, that it can be dangerous getting your dinghy on and off of that riprap. So by incorporating a dinghy dock that is designated for the storage and offloading of these dinghies, would make it much safer for everyone using the mooring field for the sailboats, and keeps it a little bit more orderly than just throwing the boats up on the riprap. And then along the route, we'd also have, or along the levee road, the dike road, we'd incorporate something like a vertical structure. So before I mentioned more vegetation, this one could be something more artistic that creates this overhead structure. It could be sails, it could be vines, it could be art pieces, which we'll see in the next couple slides. First, I'd like to show some examples of what a ruined park might look like. The one on the left shows, the vegetation overtaking what's there currently, something like that, but in a more managed fashion. And the one on the right is in Toronto, and it's a homage to a Native American group.
The First Nation.
The First Nation. something in terms of or the restroom building. It could be as simple as having a small little shack with a few restrooms, or it could be something contemporary like the one on the right. Something that's a showstopper but hides the bathrooms but creates this modern flair at the end of the dike. And then some vertical structures. I mentioned before, they could be very artistic. So that's essentially rebar on the left, covering the path. Vines can grow up. You can see they have some flowers in pots along the edge to give it a little bit of color. This could be an opportunity to team with local artists and programs or nonprofits.
Evening lighting.
Oh, and you could also string evening lighting through this as well. So you could have twinkle lights similar to what the beer garden had before. Thank you, everyone, for paying attention to me for as long as I was.
So what you saw is quite a menu. And the challenge then is what's the appetizer, what's the entree? So earlier today, Tom Zulik asked me, well, what do we do first? So what happens, everything we've shown you is very possible from a funding standpoint. Most of the images we showed you have a high degree of eligibility in terms of some of the public funding sources. Take some of it with a grain of salt, because until we get into the next phase of design and detailing, which is down the road, that's where we test some of the regulatory permitting issues. Now, we had a fairly candid conversation with the regulatory folks, and they're very receptive of the intent. But until you get to the detail, that's when the lady sings the blues. It's that point. As this moves forward and as you prioritize some of the elements, there's a lot of things that can be done short-term, fairly cost-effectively. And the reason I encourage that is that demonstrates to the funding agencies for the bigger projects that you're serious about the plan, you're serious about the community's commitment to the money, because a lot of the funding programs have cost share that we as a community have to pony up. So the demonstration projects are good in terms of showing the residents of the community that we're serious and that it can be done. It builds momentum in terms of endorsement. It builds momentum in terms of awareness of the waterfront and the evolution in a good way. And then it also then creates momentum to some of the larger projects. So the sailing beach, the Buckeye, some of the kayak launches, all those things are very easy, short-term. Encouraging the private development and feeding off of that is also good. Some of the street and the intersection improvements with some of the upcoming road improvements. So there's some partnerships and some momentum and synergy that can happen. So the bigger items are the humanizing and the promenade, the levee, making it more attractive. I mean, that's half a mile and that's expensive. You get a bridge that's being renovated right now. There's some things we could do with the paving surface that might tie it into this. The shoreline, the transient dockage, regardless of the location, that's obviously more of a cost challenge and more of a regulatory coordination and approval process. The excursion boat can happen in any of these scenarios, and again, improved dockage, and as those areas become more desirable, and as some of the other investment in the community, the conferencing and things like that. So you got a lot of things going on that you can tie into promoting and cost sharing, and there's talk of a TIF, so that can play out on the waterfront too. And what we want to do is have programming. The amphitheater, as you saw, the one structure, doesn't have to be an expensive structure. It's not cheap, but it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be fairly simple. The shoreline and the coastal engineering is a big ticket item. So what I'm trying to say is it's all doable. What I'd like you to encourage is what's the right fit for you, what's the right size, and this waterfront really is about Hudson, its residents, its wellness, people walking, recreating. It's very important in terms of encouraging. You saw those two kind of pink, purple development zones. It's very important in promoting that. I think it's also important in terms of recruiting other investments and businesses. So when, whether you're working for Anderson on that side of the river and live here, so that you can attract middle management, good school superintendents, new businesses, The waterfront is huge in terms of attracting investment to the community. So with that, Rich, Mike, Tom, did I leave anything out?
I have a question for you. Well, first of all, I think it's great.
Oh, thank you.
Great job. Second, what would you say is to get the most bang for the buck, what would you do first?
This is not going to sound diplomatic, but at every project, promote public access. So whether it's an enhancement of a walkway, sailing program, even the enhancement of the boating dock, anything that'll promote awareness. Programming doesn't cost you anything. Get the schools down there, get the birders down there, get the rowers down there, work with them. Work with the trail systems and the linkages. You've got a fantastic trail system that brings Minnesota here, brings you up to Stillwater back, those kinds of things that don't cost you anything. The first thing to do also is to, as I said, we're going to put a matrix together that's the cost sharing and the partnerships. Take that serious. Look at it like a triptych. I'm going on a trip and I've got all these options and destinations. And they're all going to have different cycles when they're available. They all have different funding. So that's a huge thing, is to shepherd that like there's no tomorrow, because that's what's going to bring you to these projects, is that matrix. And then I would, even though it's not tomorrow, I would seriously start doing some preliminary design development of the, resolve where you want the transient dockage among yourselves, and then start lobbying the permitting agencies and start getting some feedback and start developing a game plan to get that done. The destination and the services out at the end of the levee, I think they're important. And some of those, again, the bridge is being resurfaced. It's not the greatest promenade right now. And excuse me for being candid, but there's some simple fixes on that levee that can make it more desirable, with some of the little Tivoli lights that Alex was mentioning, these little nodes. If you, in the drawings, we were showing something every couple hundred feet. 2,000 feet's whatever it is, it's a long way. And if you can create these little nodes that animate and get some services out there, because that's a terrific beach. So if you notice that some of these uses, you've got the junior sailing, I've got the Sirius Marina, I've got the excursion boat, I've got the paddlers and the naturalists, I've got a young beach, I've got a active teenage plus beach out there. So you've got all these, and right now you do have a certain separation of some of these things. I think the levee's a challenge that could be cleaned up at not a very high cost. And again, if you can get activity out there fairly inexpensively, even if you create some kind of a shroud that hides the ugly stuff, the dumpsters, and even if there's a pump out or porta potties, but they're enclosed in something attractive, and some nice plaza areas where people want to go, and again, program it. I mean, if it's beautiful, so I have a simple measurement of my past projects. And I'm dating myself, because I'd always imagine, where would you go to a town? You go to the pharmacy, which we used to have every corner, and you buy the postcard shot. So where's the postcard shot in our waterfront? That was one test. The other test is, where are the wedding pictures? So my wish for you is that the terminus of that pier is so hot that you're going to figure out how to get a golf cart down there and get wedding parties out there for those pictures. And that is going to be in every wedding album. That's my wish for you. That's my test of success. Not to mention the future boaters that are learning to sail right now.
So from your answer, do I understand that maybe the dike is the thing to try to dress up first?
I think that would be a huge one. That, and then if the shoreline is a bigger one, but I would tackle the shoreline as well. Yeah, those are the two big ones. And the shore and the levee, don't let me underestimate it. The potential of utilities, paving. It's a long, long walk. But whether the shoreline or just the excursion boat, it's your portal to downtown. It's your portal to the islands. And I want to mention something else, that I'm doing a little research on the islands. You're a unique community. Not every community has these wonderful islands out there. And I understand that the dredging is no longer what it used to be, and the Corps is no longer bringing sand. But I'm doing a little research to see how we can stabilize those islands, so they maintain, so they become a calling card and a character of your waterfront that's unique. So that's another thing we have going on the burner. So the levee does not have to be expensive. And you saw the little artistic archways, and I mean, it can be fairly inexpensive. The other easy move is the Buckeye and the sailing program.
Well, that beer garden's got to be worked in there somewhere.
Oh, for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
so I'm accused of being I'm accused of being a storyteller, so forgive me. But in Milwaukee County now, they have 5 beer gardens that were reintroduced. They were there way back when. I mean, the brewers. I just finished working on South Shore Beach. Miller donated $500,000 for their beer garden. I'm working in Chippewa Falls. We're trying to get Leinenkugel to pitch in. So here again, I'm looking for money. I'm looking for the right thing. But back to Milwaukee County, those beer gardens make $80,000 to $100,000 a year. So 5 of them, that's $500,000. Now, right now, it goes in the general fund. I'd encourage you, if you did have a beer garden that was successful, that you put the money back into the waterfront, if that's legally allowed. Madison, and you know how Madison likes to debate things forever. Madison, I mean, the Memorial Union is one of the most phenomenal public waterfronts in my travels in the world. I bring foreigners there, and they just go, wow. So Madison, in its I better say the right thing, in its process, over a year of talk, has now got a beer garden in Obrick Garden on Lake Monona, and it's just taking off. So I think, again, it's we do come from a diverse group of immigrants, of which that was part of their culture. The one little photo that Alex showed of the beer garden, that was Al Johnson's restaurant up in Door County. So that was private. It looks like a public park, but it's wonderful. It's open, and people are responsible. You know, it's family-based, like the old beer gardens were. It's you don't go there to just get drunk on a Friday night. You know, you can manage them responsibly. Any other clarifications?
Yeah, just one more question. In your preliminary discussions with the authorities, the DNR, what has been the feedback on that floating pier?
It all depends on the detailing. They like the fact that if we did a floating pier where the seawall is today, they like the fact that we would basically modify the vertical wall, which is not very friendly for habitat and it's not very friendly for climate. Their big concern is public access and shadow in the water, again, for aquatic life. So that has to be worked out, and sometimes it comes down to a negotiation. How wide is this thing? How big is this thing? In the meeting we had, I kind of said, well, you know, we'd like this to also not just be transient dockage, but we'd like it to be a boardwalk. So I can go from a land-based trail out on the transient dock and then back in. So I can fish, so I can recreate. And to do that, you know, if those of you that have boats in marinas, the finger piers and the head piers can get pretty small. They can get 6 feet, 8 feet. If you have services, they're a little bigger, but usually no more than 8. Your finger piers are 3 feet, 4 feet. But you've got your sea legs. The ordinary public person doesn't have the same kind of sea legs than a sailor. But the argument I also gave them is that if I were to design a recreational multi-purpose path in today's standards, I'd be designing a 12-foot path. So now if I have some dockage there, I'd need another couple of feet. So it wouldn't be a 6 or 8 or a 10 feet. It should be a substantial dock that feels like you're walking on concrete. That's all possible. So we're not talking about something skinny. And I think the initial concept of it being the equivalent of a land-based trail was acceptable. Now again, how do we talk about the impacts and the anchoring system? Is it pile supported? Is it chain and cable? Those kinds of discussions. I think, you know, it's not going to be a cakewalk, But we started at a very, what's the word? A non-receptive dialogue for about 15, 20 minutes. By the end of the, I did some of those sketches that you saw tonight. Got a strong handshake. Not only that, I was invited to a panel discussion about 3 weeks ago that was sponsored by the St. Croix River Association, sponsored by the Wisconsin DNR, the Minnesota DNR, and the National Park Service. And I presented what our mission was here, no solutions, but they invited us to present what's going on in Hudson's waterfront at this St. Croix River Association. So they thought enough to invite us to that. I think that was a good sign. Any other clarifications?
Anybody else?
Okay.
Oh, very exciting. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Very well done, Ed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
It's not easier, it would have been done.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's great.
All right.
We do have a couple more copies coming.
More coming.
The copier decided it didn't want to work anymore, so Randy, I'll get your copy here. In a minute. Sorry.
I apologize.
No, that's fine.
Checks in the mail.
Or you can arm wrestle for those there.
No, Bill's touched it.
All right, discussion and possible action on request for a timely extension of Class B liquor beer license from Jeremy Jones from the local.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Jones with the local, 4 Brookmose Park Lane, Hudson, Wisconsin's my address. Local's at 1801 Ward Avenue, Suite 240. Give you an update. We've done a bunch of demo. We've ripped down some walls. We're opening it up at a lot. Taking down some walls, it's kind of affected some of the ceiling. There's a drop ceiling in it, so a lot of the track was on them walls. That's not something I really anticipated. So now basically what it's shaken out to is we're going to have to put in a whole new drop ceiling. And we're still working on the floor too. Things are progressing. Took a little bit longer than I was anticipating also to get the building permit. I'm asking for an extension to January 1st. I'd like to be open before that. I just talked to one of my construction guys last night. He said if we get moving, we don't hit any more hiccups, we can be open by November 30th was the date he gave me. I'd open up tomorrow if I could, obviously. So I'm here to ask for an extension to January 1st.
Jeremy, do you want longer than that? Are you sure you can get it done by then?
I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm not a construction guy. I would take longer. I'm trying not to ask for the world, and then like I said, I'd be open tomorrow if I could. I'm tired of working for other people. Love to work for myself. Maybe going back a couple more months isn't the worst idea, so I'm not back here January 1st. I don't plan to be. I don't want to be, but like I said, I'm new to construction, and I got guys helping me. I have a general contractor, and getting anybody right now in construction stuff because they're all backed up and extremely busy.
Well, it's 90 days until.
Yeah, and one of the things is we keep having extension. Tell us what you need.
March.
Okay, yeah, that sounds excellent. If I'm not open by March, I got a butt chewing coming.
That work?
That'd be 4.5 months.
Yeah.
That work?
Almost 5.
All right, motion?
Move to approve till March.
Till March. Okay, motion second to approve till March.
Was it March 1st or March 31st? Which one do you want?
March 31st.
Okay. All right, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Discussion and possible action on Carmichael Ridge, second edition, development agreement, M&I Homes.
Thank you. One of several conditions attached to the approval of the Carmichael Ridge phase or second edition was the successful approval of this second development agreement, which basically balls up all the work that we had remaining, grading, erosion control, streets, a number of other things, and incorporates it into a new development agreement. So it takes that first one, carries over what we have left from that first one, plugs it into the second one. It also makes it a little bit shorter and I think a little bit easier. That project came together really rapidly, I know, last year. And we've been working with MI very closely on making sure that we get that subdivision buttoned up before wintertime. Obviously, you've seen a lot of activity around the Culver's entrance. We'll be doing the extension of that median. The Holiday Inn Express project looks like it's moving forward now as well. So what this does, and because Catherine's been gone on vacation, I wanted her to chance to look at it, but I got to keep this moving.
Toss you under the bus.
I'm not throwing you under the bus, Catherine. I'm sorry. Like the Girard agreement that we worked on, the council approved at the last meeting. I want to look for allowing staff to work with the city attorney so she can review it and then authorize the mayor to sign the agreement. With the main items remaining being the erosion control piece, some of the final wear course on the streets where they made connections on Ward Avenue and to Cooley. That will have the full wear course on it. So it won't be the bituminous wedge that's throughout the rest of the development. We'll actually do the whole street up to that first cul-de-sac. I can't remember the name of the street. So it basically just outlines all of those things. And we have to have the surety in place too if they aren't able to perform and meet their obligations. So,
How many total units out there, Mike?
146.
When it's all done, 146?
Yep, 146.
Okay. All right, is there a motion?
So moved. What do you want exactly?
We're authorizing staff to work with the city attorney to.
I'll make that motion.
And authorize the mayor to.
Second, I'll second that.
All right. Got a motion, a second discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion's approved. Discussion, possible action on wastewater budget adjustment.
Good evening again. Just looking for a budget adjustment on a study master plan basically for the sewer collection system, which is going to define any short and long-term sanitary collection system needs with the infrastructure, how far we can go out. Basically, we're looking for growth projections, things of that nature, and just how far we can go out in the collection system until we have to do some major improvements to the trunk line. Looking for just a budget adjustment of $35,700 this year, which we will take from in the current budget from unused funds. We'll just be moving money from account to account.
It'll actually be internal.
Yeah.
Not really a budget adjustment, just moving money within his
just
budget.
internally moving. So
a budget adjustment is technically when you increase it, which you're not actually doing. So.
I'll move to approve the wastewater budget adjustment.
Budget transfer.
I'm sorry, transfer, excuse me.
Right? Is that better?
Second.
Got a motion, a second discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion's approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kip. Discussion and possible action on formation of EMS ad hoc committee. Wow. Pretty formal there, Joyce. You're gonna.
Yes, well, in the course of studying this, I've learned a lot, and I think it's important that we understand it all, but, let me bring up my. Oh, no, now my presentation is not, oh, there it's loading. That's the old one. Let's see if I can get the other one to load. There we go. Okay, so, want to formalize the ad hoc EMS committee. So I've got the purpose and the plan. We want to develop and implement the actions to move the St. Croix EMS to financial stability, maintain a community-based service model. So the real goal is to improve the current model. So Jim Weber and I have been meeting with Brandon, Josh, and Brenda. We want to understand the issues and consider how to implement option 3 and address the issues. So we need a formal committee to get input, particularly from the community. So we'd like to especially get community input, and that's going to be the biggest thing, is making sure that the community understands what's needed and is willing to help with it, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. We also need to get input from our municipal partners, and then the St. Croix EMS employees, we need to survey them. We also need to work on a retention plan, find out what they are looking for, and then a SWOT analysis. And a SWOT analysis is a tool that is often used in business, analyzing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We also want to get input from people with leadership and business experience, and that's why I invited the people that I invited to be on the committee, and they've accepted that, or they understand that the mayor will appoint them, but they said that they would accept if appointed. But we also want to survey other EMS professionals and providers on their best practices, and then also, not listed here, but maybe a patient satisfaction series survey, and something with the receiving facilities. One of the things where we're going to need community input is seeking increased Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements. So one of the things that we learned was that Medicare is 51% of our runs, Medicaid is 9% of our runs. So 60% of our runs are Medicaid and Medicare. The reimbursements are well below the cost of service, and they have not increased proportionally with cost of service. So we are going to have to activate the community to lobby our legislators, both at the federal level and at the state level, to improve the Medicaid reimbursements. So for example, with Medicaid, Milwaukee has put together a proposal. There's federal funding that's available that would increase the cost of the reimbursement for Medicaid, and there would be no cost to the state for this, because even the administrative costs would be covered. So we need to get that improved. The city of Hudson has 50% of the service population, but 70% of the runs. We've got all of the senior living facilities, and that's because my take on that is who's going to build a large facility out in the town of Troy or the town of Hudson if they don't have access to city water and sewer? So that's why we've got the senior living facilities. So anyway, that's where we're getting a lot of Medicare and Medicaid runs. Brenda ran the information from the senior facilities, and then also subsidized housing, which is likely to have, the people there are more likely to be covered by Medicaid, group homes as well. And this accounts for the disparity between the size of our service population versus the number of runs. So we also need to monitor and improve billing and collection methods. So one of the things that we looked at, and that Brenda did a study on what the market rates are for the billing rates, and we recommended an adjustment to market rates. And so we'll have to keep an eye on those and make sure that we continue to keep them at the market levels. And then decreasing the cost of collecting. So the billing service is up for renewal in June, and so we want to initiate an RFP for billing, see if we can get a better deal for that. The other thing is, it's a good idea to separate the collections from the billing so that the billing service doesn't have any incentive to send things into collections, because if it goes into collections, then they collect a larger percentage. The state collection service will actually add the cost of collection to the bill rather than taking out a percentage from what is collected. And so a test has started on that to see how that works. So
Wisconsin has a collection service?
yes, the
Okay.
state has.
I didn't know.
Mhm. So the recommendations that I'm making for the committee, myself as the chair, Jim Weber, Paul Rohde, who is the owner of Agave Kitchens, Colleen Hammer, who is the director of operations for Immunostar, and Bill Campbell, who is the owner of Campbell Grants and Research. Then we also will, of course, utilize the city employees, Brandon, Josh, and Brenda. So anyway, the community made it clear they value our local EMS. This committee will get the community involved in its improvements. The meetings will be held at 7 p.m. on weeknights so that community members can attend.
So there were past EMS people that spoke during public
Pardon?
comment? There were people that have been in the EMS for like 30 years and wanted to participate. Will you try to get feedback from them as well? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. The goal is to get as much information and as many ideas from as many people as possible.
Joyce,
Okay.
I'm sorry, John, did you have another question?
No, he was.
Joyce, you said that one of the main goals of your ad hoc committee is to maintain a community-based system. So I assume from that you will not have input from anybody that has a different viewpoint.
We will get input from everyone, but this is what the citizens have asked for. So
I'm sorry?
this is what the citizens have asked for.
Well, I'm not sure that's the case, but at the last EMS Commission meeting, you were there, and you heard Tim Foster and Stan Wecken say that if there was not a reallocation of the funding formula, they would move. In fact, Tim Foster made a motion to do an RFP for the service. So there's a potential that the EMS Commission, which according to the charter shall be responsible for the direction and management of the Ambulance and Emergency Medical Services Department, would have a conflict with your committee about that issue. How do you propose to resolve that?
I think it's an issue of continuing to work with them and trying to say, we have a direction, and what they're asking for is really impossible for the city right now. The cost to the city would be tremendous.
I understand that.
And it would, if it took place this year, it would wreck EMS before we could even get an RFP in place. So so what they're asking for is a non-reality, that it can't happen. So, but they may decide to go that way.
Yeah, that was my point.
But here are the things we're working on. We're continuing to develop the information. Like, for example, just doing some rough non-Brenda calculations on the Medicaid alone, those services, those 9% cost us $69,000 more than our expenses. Not what we charge anybody else, but that's an issue that we really need to work on, and it may take us. That's not going to happen overnight. There are a couple things we could get some relief fairly quickly, but some of that's a large national issue even.
Sure, but
these kinds of things we want to say, we need to be moving in all these directions, which the EMS Commission has not done. As a group, they have not really addressed all these issues, and we're gonna bring some more resources to try to help solve this thing.
So you don't think the EMS Commission is doing its job?
I don't think they've done some of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, then getting back to my point, Tim Foster and Stan Wecken have made it clear that if the city does not agree to go along with their proposal to reallocate the funding formula, that they're going to move that we have an RFP for the service. Now, that's different than what Joyce is proposing for this ad hoc committee, because you're saying it's got to be a community, maintain a community-based system. So we'll have your ad hoc committee with that viewpoint, and then we'll have 3 votes on the EMS commission saying, yeah, we're going to do an RFP to get an outside service to run. Who's running the boat? What's going to happen if there's that conflict?
Well, in my opinion, if they leave Hudson, which that's in their purview, if we decide not to renegotiate the contract, which I personally think we should, then we still have an EMS that has to support the city of Hudson, with or without the town of Hudson, with or without North Hudson, with or without the town of Troy. We're the ones running the EMS, that there is a contract that we provide services to. So it's certainly within their purview to do that, but if that would sort of, in my opinion, disband the EMS commission, but we still have to have EMS here in Hudson. So we can't escape that.
No, I understand that, but the point is, there are 3 votes on the EMS commission that can go that direction. So they'll approve it, and then it'll come to the council. So we're gonna have this split. And, you know, I'm just looking down the road a couple months, that's what's gonna happen.
But he's referencing an RFP, John, where I think you were addressing them pulling out.
It sounded like you said that they want to do an RFP.
They want to do an RFP for the service, because they're saying we can't afford it. I mean, that's the unspoken
But the
word.
EMS commission they have, at least from where I'm sitting, there's a group, 3 different entities that are essentially contracting with us to provide EMS services to them. So they can't really, I don't believe, can dictate what the city.
No, it's an advisory group.
With or without an RFP, it's an advisory group.
It's an advisory group, but they'll pass it and it'll come to you. So then you're gonna have to consider something from the EMS commission that's at odds with what the ad hoc committee's position is. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's gonna come down the track.
Well, and I think what's interesting is that we're gonna get a bunch of, just a different angle on it from the EMS ad hoc committee than we're getting from the commission, which probably is gonna be a.
Well, clearly we will. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the point, yeah, that's what
Well,
I'm
there
raising.
should be some communication, it seems like, between, like, this committee would serve as a resource. It's the EMS commission that is a standing commission created by ordinance. It's responsible for the budget and all of that. This is more of a temporary to flesh out some of these issues and bring it to, I would guess, both the commission and
What do
actually
you-
public safety, because public safety,
Sure.
at least under ordinance,
Joyce,
has
what-
purview over EMS.
What do you envision the time frame for the existence of this ad hoc committee?
At least, well, till the next, at least till the next budget cycle.
I mean, are you looking at it as years?
Well, I think that if we don't, we have to get results in time for the next budget.
And you're saying 2019 budget?
Yes.
Because that, along with this, when we do the 2018 budget, so by November 16th or whatever that date is, you as a body will have to make, some decision will have to be in place, whether we're gonna have a 50-50 funding for 2018 or if we're gonna have our current funding, because that's gonna be about an $80,000 or $70,000 difference. So just keep that in mind too, that you as a group are gonna have to make that decision. And it
Yes.
could be driven by the decision made by the.
Could be.
Well, and add 2 more, what are we gonna do with the EMS potential property at Ward? Are we gonna do a fire building? And I'd like to know what the fire department and the police department think too. So we're kind of,
Well, that was discussed somewhat at the last.
I apologize, I
Why
wasn't
not?
there, and I didn't watch the video either, so I will go back and do that, but,
I didn't see anything in here that would indicate that you want to take that on as part of your discussion. No. And I would hope not, because I don't think that that belongs in the scope of the ad hoc committee.
I guess I'm referring to us as a body here then,
Yeah.
but this will definitely add some interesting insight.
But Jim, I just wanna ask you to clarify, because I want the other members of the EMS commission to know what it is you think that we haven't done that we should have done.
Well, I think there's a pretty good list here of things that.
Well, tell me what they are.
The Milwaukee program, had anybody talked to the League of Municipalities about that? Did you know that there were efforts at the national level to change Medicare and Medicaid funding?
We know all that. We know the Medicare. We can't control that at this level, Jim.
But you can start to influence that. You know, that's what part of what we need to do, is be influencing that. So,
Are we gonna vote on whether are we gonna do this?
how much more do you just take a look at this and.
You know what? I want
ask-
you to tell me.
Excuse me. You asked me a question. I'm starting to say something. Do you want me to talk or not?
Well, you said, how much do you want me to go through? And I was responding to it. Jim, do whatever you want to do. I just want the people on the commission to know that you think we haven't done our job and why.
Well, for one thing, I don't think the commission has the focus that the five of us are going to have. You know, we've been meeting as someone said, unauthorized group, which is not correct. We were just meeting as a couple of us interested in what was going on and trying to understand the situation. So there was no authorization or unauthorization. Joyce was authorized as to represent the council. So they represent public safety to that committee. And so we were just working together, and because we care about what this is and had some interest and spent some time on it. I think we spend more time trying to understand the issues, trying to look for different solutions, and trying to help the EMS Commission. You know, the things that the EMS Commission decided, the last agenda, was pretty much prepared by this group, the ideas that came out of that group. You know, not that they wouldn't have come up with some of them, but we were a group that was kind of organized to really focus on these things, more so than they were. We had more access to information than they did. We chose to. We spent more time on it. We're just focused on it in more depth and looking at more possibilities.
Anything else?
Pardon?
Is there any other things that the commission has failed to do that you think should have been done?
It's a hard job. I was on that commission when I was in the town of Troy, so I understand how difficult that job is. So
Well, I'm not saying it's difficult or not.
It's not easy, and their issue has always been funding. You know, they want the service, but they've always struggled with funding, and we're trying to find some ways to change that, and trying to find some ways. So what do people really want? What are we really willing to pay for? Do we need is it set so big that we need a referendum to create funding to do this? You know, those are the kinds of things that we're trying to develop more information. Now, the EMS Commission, at least one person is saying, well, all those people who are talking about this, they only represent people who work on EMS. They don't represent the community. They don't represent North Hudson and town of Hudson, I got more input from people from the town of Hudson about the survival of this group. So we're going to try to build a better base of information about what people really want and make it factual and reduce the opinions. So that's, you know, those are things that we can undertake that they don't have to.
I think that
I really want to provide more support, more information for them, Tom.
I think if you go back through the minutes of the EMS Commission for the past 3 years, you'll find that rates, funding, alternatives have been discussed many different times, because this is not a new issue. The fact that it's expensive to maintain this system is something that everybody on the EMS Commission is well aware of. Brandon knows it, everybody knows it, which was why the reason that we were prompted to respond to the Lakeview offer. because of the funding. So we're aware of it, Jim. We've been aware of the problems.
Absolutely. And I know they're aware of the funding. That's always been an issue. So we're trying to find some ways to change that thing. And one of the advantages, or one of the pieces about option 3, and I hate to go back to calling it option 3, but that's what we, as I thought as a council, we voted 5-1 that we wanted to drop this and move down the pathway of option 3. So, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to support that, reinforce that, figure out how to make that work. That's what we're really trying to do. That's what I heard the council say.
I'm going to move that we form the EMS ad hoc committee as recommended.
Can I just make a suggestion or a comment? It might be helpful to have just language in some kind of description of your committee, just as you said, to provide support and information to the St. Croix EMS Commission, expected lifespan, not that it's in concrete, but so you've got a document that really describes what your role is with respect to these other committees and how long, what your outcome is, to provide some recommendations for the 2019 budget. Is that to the St. Croix EMS Commission? And I don't know if public safety is still considering this issue as well. So that there is something that describes what your role is with respect to those committees and your lifespan and so forth.
Public safety keeps it on an ongoing agenda item, so we can discuss anything that develops.
I just think it'd be good to have an understanding, a written understanding of what and I haven't seen this until, I'm not saying it would be based on that, but some of these other comments that have come up in the discussion, how it interfaces with and then bring
Yeah, I would
that back
expect
to
that
the
as well.
council.
I want to make that as part of my motion. That you have a charter and a sort of a goal.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be an ordinance like the other committees because they're standing committees, but you just need something in writing.
So we're going to know what that is before we vote, or?
I think it needs to come back, yes.
Yeah.
I think it would need to come back and be approved and then have the appointments. That's how I see
You
it.
can pass a you can pass it with condition of what purpose statement?
Yeah, it seems like wouldn't the council want to see it because it's the council creating the?
Well, I know the EMS Commission would be interested in seeing it.
I personally am okay with them doing it as part of what we would expect out of them. In other words, I don't need to see it, however, maybe that's just me, so my motion stands. I'd rather see it formed and then move on, because we got lots to do, so I don't think it's gonna, I think they're already well on their way to establishing some interesting things that may or may not impact the whole thing, especially if the commission's gonna do an RFP or force our hand some other way.
I just want to know what it is. That's a simple request. Have we had ad hoc committees for other commissions?
We had one for the downtown parking, we had one.
A facilities ad hoc committee looking at public facilities, buildings, needs.
Is that something you can get, Joyce, or do?
Yes. I would like to get this committee going, I think, and maybe even ask the committee to evaluate the charter and make sure that they agree with it.
John, can you redo your motion to include a purpose statement so it comes back here?
Yeah, for sure. Do we want to do that as an interim, do it for final approval, or do we just want to wait and then approve it then?
I don't have to wait.
Okay. So yeah, I would like to see as part of the formation of this ad hoc committee, purpose statement, charter, and kind of a timeline, because we're talking about the 2019 budget. So kind of what's going to happen within that span.
So you'd like that before we form the committee? No, after, okay.
As part of that, yeah.
Okay. So bring that back to the council right away after our first meeting.
Sure.
I'm not gonna vote for it without seeing what the statement is. I'm not saying I won't vote if I can see what it is, but I'm not gonna vote until I see what it is. I mean, I'm gonna vote no until I see what it is.
I get that. Is anyone going to second my motion?
I'll second it.
We had a motion, a second. All right, so from what you showed us here, Joyce, it appears as though a big, really big portion of the expectation here for funding is going to be coming from changes in the Medicare system, Medicare and Medicaid. Is that true?
Well, we're gonna have to address that, but that's why one of the reasons.
I don't mean address it. I mean, we all know that the funding, we have shortfalls in our funding. And as you pointed out, it's disproportionate, the rise in the costs versus the actual reimbursements. And especially with the baby boomers now moving through falling off of insurance and going on to Medicare, where insurance is actually more than twice what the reimbursement is of Medicare. So it's becoming exponential. So how are we going to make that up? And it seemed as though a big portion of this, I mean, the only thing I saw that was going to create any type of funding, additional revenue, had to do with lobbying to get Medicare and Medicaid increases. Is that true?
I think there's also some funding that could be expected from the billing changes.
That's not much. You know, that's minuscule. We've seen that in the past. So what percent does Medicare and Medicaid have to go up in order to make this sustainable?
Medicare is the average reimbursement for.
I know what it is. Well, how much, so we know this.
Yeah, so it would have to go up
We know
about 50%.
that, we know that Medicare is, reimbursements are less than half of insurance reimbursements. We all agree on that?
I don't think we're going to get our money from that.
Well, I mean, that's a big portion of it, but I mean, we all agree on that, right? That Medicare
that's
reimbursements are less than half of what the insurance reimbursements are right now, right? I mean, this is a pretty simple question.
I don't know what the reinsurance, you're talking about private insurance?
Yes.
I don't know what that number is around the.
Brandon, it's about 1,100 or 1,000?
Insurance is about, so just across the board, our average reimbursements right now are about $580. Across the board, that's everything combined. Commercial insurance is roughly $1,200 to $1,300, and Medicare is about $480.
Okay, thank you. So we can all agree, or is anybody going to argue Brandon's point here? We can all agree that Medicare reimbursements are less than half of insurance reimbursements. We can all agree that insurance reimbursements are declining. The number of reimbursements as a percentage of our total runs is declining as baby boomers hit age 65 and are on Medicare. We all agree with that? Anybody disagree with that? Okay, so we're going to lobby our state and federal representatives, elected officials, to increase Medicare and Medicaid how much? Do we want to get it up to the insurance rate so that we don't have declining reimbursement? I mean, I just want to know. Because this is a big portion of what I saw there. You know, you made a big point of saying that the reimbursements are declining and our costs are increasing. And you want us to lobby our state and federal legislators to be able to increase this. How much? I mean, are we going to have them more than twice what they're currently paying? Is that what we're thinking? I want to know what letter I'm writing.
Okay.
To my U.S. Senator. Increase Medicare and Medicaid by 100%? 150%?
Sure, why not?
To match the costs.
Okay.
Match costs.
And what's the likelihood? I mean, give me a ballpark.
I think on the
percentage-wise, where do we stand? And what's the likelihood on this?
On the state, I think it's pretty likely because there are several states who are already have this program. And all we had to do was create a state.
And what states are those?
California, Oregon.
Yeah.
One of the Dakotas, I think maybe Nebraska. I don't remember all the states. But, and
You think our legislature here in Wisconsin is going to do this? Okay.
I think I would say, why would you continue to turn down federal funding? Because it doesn't cost the state anything to get in this particular program, to get the money.
And
it's
that will
worth
take
about
the
400.
reimbursements
It's
to
worth,
what?
the numbers that I saw were $200 to $300 to $400 per call.
Per call?
Yeah.
All right, so now we're at $600. And we're falling off insurance that's currently at, what did we hear, $1,100, $1,200. So we're picking up a little bit of ground. But again, what percent do we need to see an increase in order to make this sustainable? And then what happens next year? If, let's just say we're successful in lobbying to be able to get those $200 reimbursements. Where are we at next year at this time of budget time? Does that do it for you? Are we good? Are we sustainable? Or are we just closing the gap a little bit?
I think it's
while we continue to erode our levy cushion, and we'll continue to increase spending. So where are we at next year? Where do we need to be successful? And I mean really successful, sustainable, because we've got right now, I think you know the numbers, you've seen the numbers, we've got about 2 years before our levy cushion is gone. So where do we need to be when we go into budget time next year to be sustainable, where you think we had a successful run over the past year? And then how much of that levy cushion are you willing to spend before you think it's not successful?
Well, you have to define successful. You keep using
Yeah, bingo, I want to know.
You keep using the word sustainable, but I will go back to the day I was elected. EMS, including police, fire, and ambulance services, is not a profit center. Thank God we get money back,
John,
on EMS.
This isn't about profit, and it's not about increasing taxes.
Sustainability is just a matter of what is our tax base willing to
Sustainability right now
manage.
is trying to not erode our levy cushion. I mean, I know you understand numbers.
Of course,
and I know that if you look at these numbers,
raise our funds in other ways other than through taxpayer. What they're not telling you is about the ability to raise funds outside of the current tax base. There's other mechanisms to manage funding. I think that a committee like this should be looking at other models and other ways to manage EMS. So
Okay.
and I agree with you. I'm not expecting to fund the EMS out of vending machine money we get out of the federal government. And I agree with you. I don't think Wisconsin legislators are going to jump at it because they turn down federal money all the time. So I see what you're saying. However, we really need to step out and look at other programs that actually fund themselves and are doing quite a good job. That is where EMS has not had an opportunity to look at Monroe or other places in Wisconsin that basically fund themselves.
okay, so, and we know that River Falls is doing a study right now.
And we've done a
because
study, which we
I
can-
haven't seen a study. You talking about the one 10 years ago?
No, it wasn't.
Well, let's
10.
take a look at that. Let's pull that one out.
It's not 10 years ago, it's not.
It was 2010, the one that the
2010.
hospital funded.
Yeah, let's take a look at that one. Yeah, let's pull that out and look at it. I think that was ignored last time it was brought up. So, but I think that, with everybody around us doing studies, I think that, we ought to be listening to what they're saying. So let me ask the question again. How much of the levy cushion, so this is going to be a little simpler than the last couple questions, I think. How much of the levy cushion are you willing to spend pretty simple?
That's not up to me, that's up to the council.
I know, but no, I want to know, to you guys personally, how much of that levy cushion are you willing to spend?
The answer is we don't know. And I don't think realistic to sit here and guess, because that isn't how we got to this point. Yes, there are funding challenges, but they are not, they can be overcome more than one way. And I realize the levy is just one thing, just like the federal reimbursements, but there are ability to referend. There is ability to raise money via private funds.
I get that, but
There
we're
are
gonna
ways
be-
to get other money, so.
But we will be eroding our levy cushion.
But we don't know, and of course, because that's part of, we're
How
been
much of
underfunding
it, how much
EMS
of it
for
are
a
you
long
willing
time.
to spend? Pretty simple.
I would say that, so far, the community is willing to, pony up another $5 per capita to get this to, $19, was option 3, right? I think we heard that loud and clear.
Mhm.
At least that, from where I'm sitting, and that's why I voted for.
For 2018, and then.
I get that. So, is the formula and the plan set? I would say no, but, until we are able to study more and get answers from a variety of people, we don't know. So to answer your question, we don't know.
Okay.
That's why I'm voting for this ad hoc committee.
All right, anybody else?
I think the number is what we said in option 3. You know, that's the only number we have in front of us, really, that says, you know, what we need to sustain this model, and that this model has some potential of returning additional capital. So, and part of that was by being able to pick up all the transfers that we don't get.
Mm-hmm.
So there is additional funding out there, and it was significant dollars.
How much?
I think the number, one of the calculations that I heard was $120,000 a year.
We don't even know how many runs we're missing. That was discussed at the last EMS.
We don't know for sure, but we
We're
know
we're trying to get that information
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that can come out of this is allowing the EMS Commission to continue forward as they are, but getting and starting to look outside of here, and like I said, there are other models that are successful that are still public-based EMS, and where are they? I haven't seen, only my own research have I started to uncover those plans. I would hope a group like this is going to do that as part of what they do. That's why I think it's a good idea. So, and if we, at the end of the day, we run into the same problem and we crap out, well, then we got to make a change. You're right. But let's get to that point. Let's run it right to the end and see where we get to. That's.
So let's exhaust the entire levy limit.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay. That's why I was asking, when do we know if we're successful or not? How much of this are we willing to spend?
We got time. I think we got 2 years worth of time, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's all we got is 2 years.
Yeah, fair enough.
But then we're at levy limits. And then we've exhausted the cushion.
Self-imposed levy limit?
No, statutory levy limits.
I think for me, I'd like to see, and back to this, is seeing the parameters. I mean, we are up against time. It would be nice to see an end result. I know you're saying that by budget cycle next year, but I mean, if you're bringing ideas to the table, could that be 8 months? Could that be less so that we can make the right judgment going into that next budget cycle? The other question I have is, what are to what body is the recommendations going? Is it public safety? Is it council? Is it EMS commission?
It would go to public safety for recommendation to the EMS commission.
Okay, so the ad hoc sort of reports to, I'm just making sure it reports to public safety, so to speak, or gives recommendations to public safety?
That was what we had discussed, yes.
My guess is, just from the work that we've done as a people just sitting down talking, is that there'd be a variety. There would be some things that we would take directly to EMS, say, here's an idea that we came across. How do you think that would work? Or this would have to go to public safety because there are, it's going to involve city money or city rules or changes in the way we do things, or come to the council for the same reason. It would just depend on the finding on the program, on the project. So, we got to do an RFP for this or that. Then there are processes that we have to go through. It would all have to probably, it would all be run through EMS. We'd say, here's where we're headed. You know, we absolutely have to keep tied in with them, and we have to build relationships with them, because right now it's not very, you know, I'm not getting a good feeling about it right now. So we need to make sure that we're working very directly and very clearly with them. We may not work at the same purpose, though, because I'm not sure, you know, because they have a little different goal than we do. So I think we're looking at it from this, and this belongs to the city of Hudson, and we need to take responsibility for it. And we have partners out here, and we have these agreements, but we really own this problem. We really own the solution. And so that's what this committee is going to try to focus more on, and bring, you know, involve whoever we have to involve. There's nothing we can do on our own. We have no budget. You know, it's just us spending time at asking Brenda questions, asking Josh questions, asking, you know, Brandon, how do we do these things? What does this look like to you? And asking other people questions, pulling information in from as many places as we can get it, to try to create a better picture. We may, in a year, 18 months, 2 years, say, we can't do it. That may be, you know, or maybe our ultimate goal, but that's not our goal, our ultimate result. That's not our goal.
I know that, and the
Our
question
goal
is how
is
much
to
are you
have-
willing to spend?
Yeah. And
Or you hit that point, and obviously you're willing to spend it all.
I think we have to invest it.
Okay.
That's my
Joyce,
opinion.
just a suggestion that maybe this could get us going is to just take some time to put down in writing kind of the parameters of what you're doing and the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And then bring it back, and then we can look at it and vote on it. Because then we'll have something in writing, unless you want to proceed tonight, then you can.
I'm okay proceeding because I think they're going to do that, but I would like them to come back and report anyway. We can always stop it, can't we?
Well, I don't know if we want to do
I
that.
I don't want to sound weird, but we
I
could.
think the council needs to make a decision. The council's creating the committee, and I think you need to, in my view, see what the committee description and timeline and charter are. I'm just looking quickly at the functions of the EMS commission, and they're, by ordinance, you know, maintaining a sound financial condition, making recommendations on the budget, relationship between the St. Croix EMS and other services, keeping it, I mean, they're really in charge of making these recommendations to the council. So the way I see the ad hoc committee is serving the St. Croix EMS Commission and providing information to that commission to help them make these recommendations that they're charged with making under the ordinance. And I think that would be better understood if it's in writing, so people can see that.
Anybody?
And know what it is in the future when maybe different people are here, you know. It's just important to have it.
If you could bring it back in 2
document.
weeks, that'd be great. Is that enough time? Do you want 30 days? Or are you saying, you know, the mayor's not wrong, the clock is ticking. So, you know,
I'd like to get the committee together as soon as possible so that we can start looking at things.
well, I'll tell you what, I'll
Getting their
withdraw my
opinion.
motion if you guys get together and present something as soon as you can, I guess, and then we're all gonna be,
Yeah, put it on the next agenda and just get it done.
yeah, get it done. Okay, I'll withdraw my motion.
All right.
So we can't convene the committee until it's been approved.
Well, why can't you and Jim just work on what you've been working on? Because
We can, but it would be really nice to to have these people looking at it. For example, these three members that we're suggesting looking at it with us, and maybe we've been looking at it too long, too narrowly, and we need some people to say, you know, they represent the community as well, and and they're good leaders. They're decision makers, they're thinkers. So what are we missing here? Let's make sure we do this
We're
correctly.
talking about the scope of the committee, not
right,
the
yeah.
details of what you're going to
Yeah, see what you can
decide.
do in 2 weeks, and then we'll go from there. That's what I think.
I guess Joyce's question is, or her, what I'm getting is, I'd still like to talk to a couple of these people and say, here's what we're thinking about, and here's the scope. Is this gonna work? Do you want to be part of this committee? Is this something that's
okay, right?
that's functional?
Yeah, I mean,
So, just
it's
so
not a
we're not
committee.
un-
At this
I don't wanna be
point, you're
unauthorized
talking to them
anymore.
as
So,
interested
okay, so we could meet,
individuals.
we could meet with them unofficially, is what you're.
Well, it's not, the
It'd have to
committee
be
doesn't
one-on-one.
exist.
One-on-one,
Yeah.
okay, one-on-one with each of the,
Otherwise, then are we? No. The potential is that if you meet as a group before you are a group,
It's not a committee. It's
Yes.
not created at this point.
So it doesn't
We have
matter.
some
They're
people who
fine. I
are
think they're fine.
interested in EMS, but they haven't been appointed.
So they can meet.
Yes,
So we can
I
meet.
think so.
Thank you.
All right. Everybody good?
Good.
Yeah, I think, well, it's just, you're postponing till the next
Right.
meeting. Okay.
Okay, moving on. I have nothing as communication, I don't think. Nothing I can think of, other than thank you all for hanging in there tonight. Appreciate it.
That was a good meeting. I'll move to adjourn.
I do have one thing, just so everybody.
Okay.
Just so everybody's aware, the finance committee is meeting to talk about budget at 5 o'clock. Just to make sure everybody's aware of that.
good, thank
So
you for
2
letting
weeks
us
from
know.
now, and I will get information out. If the other council members that are not on the finance committee want the packet, you need to let me know. Okay.
Yes.
I'll make enough for everybody then. I just wanted to mention that, so.
Now I'll move to adjourn.
What was the,
2 weeks from now at 5 o'clock.
okay, but there was
Second.
an email about,
I'll
going,
make a packet for you.
about the going away party for, or,
That's the 25th.
is that public?
Yes, we have a motion and a
Is that not
second.
public?
Oh, no, it's public.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion's approved,
Cool
stand
enough.
adjourned. Thanks,
We're
everybody.
probably gonna give her her plaque at the next.